Welcome to the Hybrid Real Estate Professional Podcast, where we dive deep into the intersection of career, family, and finances. Learn the mindsets, tips, and strategies to help you on your personal journey to build a life of abundance and purpose for you and your family. Now here's your host, Aaron Amin. Welcome back to another episode of the Hybrid Real Estate Professional Podcast. Today I'm joined by an inspiring entrepreneur and real estate investor, Sierra Smith. Sierra and her husband blazed their own path into real estate investing back in 2012, completing multiple flips in houses they lived in, all while starting a family. She has run several entrepreneurial endeavors over the years, while also teaching herself how to flip properties. Beyond that, she also runs a coaching business and is a prolific content creator on YouTube and all other major social media platforms. We cover a lot of ground in our conversation. Let's get into it. All right, welcome to the Hybrid Real Estate Professional Podcast. Today, I am joined by Sierra Smith. Sierra is an entrepreneur, a real estate investor, and I like to think of her as one of the most problem solver personalities that I've come across on my brief time on the internet. But Sierra, I'd love for you to introduce yourself to our audience in your own words.
Hey, first, thanks for having me on this show. I'm excited to get to share my story. And if we want to dig into my life and how I got here, I started out following the traditional path, going to college and getting a degree and wanting to work my way up in my career after I finished school. I was definitely an academic, like grade A student. And so that I just was doing that traditional route and felt like I was excelling at it. So I got out of college and I think I graduated in 2014 and with a psychology degree. And I started working in mental health, and I did jobs in mental health for a couple of years before we ended up having to relocate as my husband finished school. And so when we did that, I started to branch off into entrepreneurship. But we bought our first house when we were in college, and that's one of the things that I really attribute a lot of our success to as far as like financially. Like that was one of the better decisions that we made, and at the time it felt really silly to a lot of people that we would buy a house while in school because you never know where your career is going to take you. You don't know. There's a lot of unknowns around that time in your life, and we were newlyweds at the time, and so it was just a lot. I mean, for us, we were just trying to find a cheaper place than rent. And so that was the goal. And it was 2012 when we bought that house. And yeah, we did our first live-in flip that way because when we did leave and move for his position to another state and I left my job, we were actually able to make a pretty nice profit on that house, which then we used to just pay off a lot of student loans. Like we really didn't use it to leverage to get into real estate at all. We didn't even know that we were doing a live and flip. Like we just had bought a HUD house, so it needed some work, but it was mostly cosmetic. We just did that while we lived there over the couple of years we were in school. Yeah. And then so that's how I got into real estate and kind of how I transitioned from that getting a career and working my way up. Because once we moved, I was just like, I don't want to keep working in mental health. It was taking a toll on me, and I had been in that world for so long through college and those first couple of years that I was starting to feel like there was no one normal out there. And so I was like, I need to do something to restore my faith in humanity a little bit because I thought that everyone was just struggling with mental health problems to the point where they couldn't function in society. And it was just taking a toll on me. I started trying to test out like Etsy businesses. I started cleaning on the side and doing childcare and doing some other things as we resettled. And he took on a corporate job and we were in a new state. So we did that for a little while. And then I just really realized how much I was wired to do entrepreneurship at that point because I was always coming up with ideas and I had no trouble like pursuing them. And I feel like a lot of people struggle to jump over that hurdle of when should I jump or when should I dive in? When should I leave this safety net that I have and take on this dream that I have? And so I just realized that it really felt natural to me. And so I just kept going with that route and I would do a lot of different side work and it was more lucrative than my W-2 job ever was. And so I really enjoyed that. And then, so at that point we were renting and we got pregnant and decided it was time to buy a house again. And that's when we bought our second house, and we had to do the same thing where we bought an entry-level home that needed work, and that's when we did our second live-in flip, and we were there for about 5 years before we were gonna move again, and while we were there, I started another business and got into the merchandise side of things, promotional products, and ran that successfully for 2 years before we moved again. We sold that house, and that is when we realized we should have been, like, treating the real estate part of things as an investment, because that again was the best financial thing for us at the time. Like, we made more money off of the sale of that house than we had in a chunk than we had working our regular jobs. And we were like, okay, there's something to this. Like, all we have to do is live in the house, we fix it up, like we do what we would want to do anyways, and then when we're ready to move, like, we're cashing in. Like, this is working really well. And so then we started to take the investing side of real estate a little more seriously, and we moved again, and I started to pivot with my business and think, okay, if I can get more into investing in real estate full time and maybe do something that complements that. So that's when I started taking on, like, more of a consulting role and coaching other people who want to do this as well, where they use their side hustles or a entrepreneurship journey to basically get the money to invest in real estate. So just walking my path, but with other people. And yeah, that's where we're at now. We have a single family rental, and we have our primary residence that we're turning into a house hack.
So many threads I want to pull on there. But so just want to clarify one thing though. So when you say you coach and work with other people, you help them boot up and scale their entrepreneurial ventures so that they can take that money and invest in real estate, similar to what you did. Is that right?
So I wouldn't necessarily say that I help them scale their business, but I help them get started to the point where they have, like, clarity on what they're doing. They have a path that they know that will make progress so that they can actually get this going. Because sometimes it seems like getting the traction or getting started is the hardest part for a lot of people. They don't know what avenue. There's so many different ways to build a business now, and they have a hard time aligning it with something that they don't get burnt out on. And so I help a lot in that, like, more in the headspace route, and really helping people get clarity and troubleshoot ideas, brainstorm. I think it's interesting that you noticed that about me, about being a problem solver, because I really do think there's not a hurdle that we can't get past. And it just is a matter of figuring that out. And I've done a lot of work where I don't feel like there's many limitations. And if someone out there is doing it, then you can too, and we'll figure out how. And so I'm help them catalyst to move forward rather than, like, work on the business structure itself and scale it.
100%. And that's honestly the most important part, is getting started. You can sit and plan and draft up LLC operating agreements and scheme all you want in the back room. But until you actually get out front, start taking some sort of action, there is no business to plan around. So I think that's even more valuable if you're teaching people how to, what do you say, catalyze and get going. The other important thing there is you can save money towards down payments using traditional W-2 income, which is a totally viable path. My wife and I had dual income prior to having our kids. And that's how we bought the majority of our portfolio, was just saving the money from our W-2s. But what I'm, realizing now a little later in my journey is that had we focused a little more actively, now I offer some coaching services. I'm doing group coaching and building out a community. Had I started that earlier, the money and revenue that I'm able to generate from that, which is also a feel-good business. Like, I enjoy helping other people.
Right.
So you can take something that you're passionate about, make a little extra money, and use that money to invest back in real estate. It's like a win. So I wish I had realized that a bit earlier. I think it's great that you work with other people to help with that. And one other thread from earlier. Yeah, there's a reason I introduced you as a problem solver, and that's the live then flip. Most people, when they think about living inside of a house when it's being remodeled, they have crippling anxiety and probably nightmares, right? But not only did you do it once, but it sounds like you did it again with a child. Is that right?
That's correct. Yes. And then the one that we're doing now is the same. And he's 6 years old now. So the first one, he was during the first 5 years of his life. We did it over the course of that. And there were some nightmarish moments. I'm not going to pretend like it wasn't difficult, because it for sure was. And it's maybe a little easier now doing it with him a little older, but in some ways, but really it is a challenge doing it as a family. But to speak to that, like, that ultimately, it depends on what your perspective is on that, because I want to show him hard work, and I want to show him, I want him to have some skin in the game when it comes to our real estate journey. And he helps he prepped the floors before we showed it for the rental property, before we showed it to tenants, right? Like he was over there mopping the floors. He also wrote on the wall and we had to paint it over. So there's some give and take here, but we want him to be a part of it. He loves like getting in the crawl space and helping, or getting up in the attic and helping. He loves to use the screwdriver and stuff like that. So a part of it is just that's what we want our lifestyle to look like. And we get to have this thing that we're all working together on as a family. And it's not efficient and it definitely will not get you financially. Like, it's not going to be the springboard that's like super quick. Like, you could definitely outsource it and probably do it faster than what we do. But it's also like our house, and it's just the journey that we're enjoying. And that matters more sometimes than just the efficiency of it. And because if you don't have a good time doing it, then I don't really know what you're doing it for. You can chase financial freedom, but if you're dreading every day of your life doing it, then it's really pointless. So I would just encourage people to think about what they want their life to look like and really value the journey itself. And so it is challenging. And I've learned from the first one some things I wouldn't do again. And from the second one, some things I wouldn't do again. And some different things would look for when considering that live and flip journey, especially if you have a family. But yeah, I would just say go into it knowing that it takes more time. But if you like that style and you can figure out you learn so many skills doing it yourself and you're really proud of it at the end. So I think it's worth it.
Such great points about just how you involved your family, how you guys are enjoying it. I think that's like an understated, often overlooked part of the investor's journey, right? People always talk about how many houses they own or how much cash flow they got. Very few people talk about the game they're playing and do they love the game they're playing. If you don't enjoy it, there really is, in my mind, it sounds like in yours too, why do it? And so
Right.
I think finding a strategy and a situation that fits and aligns with your goals and is in harmony with the life you want to live is very important, whether that's you buy one house every 10 years and you live in it and you treat it as your home and you enjoy that time and then you move on and do whatever you're going to do with it, or whether some people really like buying 3 or 4 homes a year and doing flips. If that's what they like doing and they have the means to do it, by all means, I think it's really important for everyone to figure out their own individual path. And that's kind of a lot of the real estate shows out there. Seems like there's this singularity of, okay, I'm going to buy this many houses and here's the number, the cash flow number I'm trying to hit. And here's how I'm going to get there. And it's formulaic, and life hardly ever works out that cleanly. Doesn't mean I don't think you should set goals and drive towards them, but just means that the path to get there, you want to constantly reevaluate. Is it in harmony with the life you want to live? And I love how young you're getting your kid involved in it. And like you said, he's drawing on the wall at the same time as he's doing something helpful, but just the osmosis learning that he'll have and that work ethic, there's just no way that doesn't serve him well in the long run. So you mentioned that there are things you learned that you wouldn't do from your first flip and things you learned that you wouldn't do from your second flip. What are some of those things?
Yeah. So from my first one, I would say I learned that buying a property that has something very unique about it in comparison to one of the cookie cutter house. When it comes to doing live in flips, because you're doing it with, not that we did it with the intention of flipping it, right? But if you're doing this on purpose as a strategy, you're doing it with the purpose that you are going to move. And that means that this property is going to be for sale again, unless you decide to rent it out. It's going to be for sale again in a fairly soon like turnaround time. Usually properties don't sell like every 2 years. But if you're going to be 2 years in and your house is going to go back up for sale, you want the least amount of competition because you want to move this property quickly. And so not getting a cookie cutter house, I can't stress that enough, because that's where you have the most competition of like properties. Like, it doesn't matter where you are on the block, like something is almost identical to the house that you have. So if you buy something a little more unique, either maybe it has a garage and other properties around it don't, or maybe it has a full basement, or maybe it has a bigger yard, or just a shed, or it could be anything, but it needs to have some sort of unique selling point that houses in that area don't. And that means that when it comes time to sell it in a couple of years, even if you haven't done a ton of value add, you're still going to have the demand for that property that you need so that you can move it and go on with your strategy. Yeah, that was the first one. The second one, I learned that I would not do a live and flip with a child in a house that only has one bathroom. If that bathroom needs remodeled, just don't. Just save yourself the whole headache. Just it has to have a 1.5 bath or don't do it. Pick a different property. Because when it comes time to do that and you don't have a way, especially doing most of the work yourself, you can't be in and out in one day. And even if you can, you're still messing with the headache of either staying somewhere else. We never did have family around, so we didn't have that luxury to be able to run over to a family member's house. So we just never got around to being able to fully remodel the bathroom because we couldn't pull off not having that functioning room. And so the rest of the house got fixed up. It had a whole new kitchen, it had everything else. But then when we went to sell it, it was like the bathroom just wasn't, it was like the sore spot in the house. And even the kitchen you can do without. You can use the sink in the bathroom and you can use a microwave. You can plug it in a different room, right? We kept our groceries in the garage for a while. Like we could do without the kitchen. And it was a hassle, but it was doable. But the bathroom just, yeah, I wish we would have had a house that had at least 1.5 baths. So we learned our lesson on that one. And I would, when it comes to having a family, especially in there, like it's not like you can just pick up and leave. Like your kid is sleeping in a crib and in every single room of the house, depending on what room you're painting or working in or where the dust is. And you have to be really flexible with how, you're comfortable with what your life looks like, right? Because a lot of people get weird if they're like, oh, we all have to sleep in the living room for 2 weeks. We need bedrooms and stuff. But you just have to be like, your house has to be like the system that is ever evolving. And you just use the room for what you need to. And then when you're done, it's awesome and you get to enjoy it. Or it's awesome and you get to sell it to somebody else and start over. It just depends on what you do.
I'm like, just my imagination runs trying to think what I would do. We have newborn twins and we have a 2-year-old daughter. And if we were in a situation like that, I don't even know what we would do. So I admire a lot that you guys took that upon yourselves and you guys solved your way through it. And the other thing is, so the house and the stage of the flip goes over a long period of time and it goes through different stages. You're also growing as individuals and you have a young child who's growing at the same time, right? So it's a lot of different things that are developing all at the same time to try and keep track of. But so are any of the houses, did you own them long distance or manage them long distance, or have they all been, you lived in them and then rented them in the same market?
Yeah, pretty much in the same market. Our one now is about 40 minutes away from us, but we self-manage. Yeah, it's always been right there. Really haven't had an interest in taking on something at a distance yet, unless I could get a family member to live in it. That's really the only, we have several family members that rent, and I would be willing to buy if they wanted to rent it. But that's, other than that, because we just don't have as great of luck with contractors or with having the work done. And I don't know if it's just because we've become handy ourselves. And so we feel like we're just a little more efficient when it comes to things, or maybe we like knowing the ins and outs of a property. I will say that, like, after fixing up the properties, we were way more comfortable with selling them or renting them because we knew all of the work that was done and we had taken things apart and put them back together and knew all the quirks of the house. And that made any sort of repairs or just understanding the property a lot easier. And then the single family rental we have now, we did not live in first, that we just had split the funds from the profit of one of the flips and bought that. And it's stressful. Like it gives us anxiety because we never lived in it. And so when they tell us that something's wrong, we don't even have any idea of, what could be going wrong. So it's interesting trying to go in and fix stuff and figure it out with someone else living there. So that's actually been my least favorite, is buying a property that we hadn't lived in before and renting it out.
Yeah, once you start to learn the guts of your house and you actually see what's inside and when maybe you even fix some of it yourself, I'm sure it's hard to just like blindly trust the work someone else did. And yeah, like
Absolutely.
we bought properties sight unseen that are 2,000 miles away,
Oh
and
my
you
gosh.
essentially know nothing, right, about the
Yeah.
actual craftsmanship and the quality of the work. It's a different game. Like you guys are doing something very different than what we're doing with the long distance rentals, but because you have the patience and because you guys are doing the work yourself and like you said, you're enjoying the journey, it makes it that much higher quality of a product and something that you're going to feel much more confident. And the other thing I think that people don't talk about enough is if as a real estate investor, like what's going to make you sleep well at night, right? Is owning a property 3,000 miles away that you don't know what's going on? Some people, there are many times where we're totally comfortable with that, especially when things aren't going wrong, but not everyone is going to be. And so if people know they want to invest in real estate, some people really want to be right up inside it and understand, or maybe they don't want to invest any further than 10 minutes drive away from their house. And that's totally fine. That's part of the individual journey that people have to trace out for themselves and understand what's their risk tolerance, what are their preferences. So I think it's really cool that you guys, like you said, it almost happened by accident the first time, but then you discovered that you enjoyed it and now you've started to replicate it. So is that kind of the path forward for you specific to real estate investing? Is that you guys want to continue to repeat this strategy?
Yeah. So that's what we're thinking. We're turning our primary residence now, like I said, into a house hack, and we're hoping to do short-term rental on the room that we're converting into its own separate studio space. And we're going to just test that out as far as a cash flow perspective goes, rather than doing a long-term rental on it at first, just because we have the luxury of it being our primary residence and we don't need it to hit any certain number per month. So we're gonna just test that out and see what we think. But the live and flip strategy we do enjoy, and we've acquired all of the tools over the years. And so it feels silly to pivot from that when we have now it's even more efficient for us, and it's even more lucrative for us to be able to do it because we're not in that stage of having to really build up the skills and the tools to do the work. Like, we're hitting our stride as far as that goes. We've taken on bigger work each time, and we don't have any carpentry training or certifications as far as that goes. My parents, they had fixed up their house when I was a kid. And I guess I just thought, oh, they refinished the floors and put in some cabinets and stuff. It's not too hard. I guess it's not that big of a deal. So I just started down the same path. Our first one was really cosmetic. Our second one, like I said, we put in a new kitchen. Of course, we pay for some work if it's installing a countertop or something, or we pay to have that done. But we usually put in floors and hang the cabinets and do all the gut work ourselves. We do most electrical and plumbing ourselves. Yeah. And then this third one, we've literally took it down to the studs on this addition that we're renovating. And I don't really know. I honestly, I was watching another investor do a flip, and he had taken the floor out and I could see the joist. And I had never done that much demo before, down to the bare bones. And I was like, oh, it doesn't look that intimidating. I can see how the boards run across there. It won't be that big of a deal. It's just over a crawl space. We needed to put vapor barrier down and put in new joists and stuff. I'm like, I think we can do that. Joists aren't that expensive. We don't even have a pickup. So we have to rent a pickup every time we haul lumber to the house. And there's lots of things that we have to do to even make this possible. And we had never done it before. But when you start taking stuff apart, then you can see how it goes back together. And we just went for it, and it's been a mess, and I wouldn't do it again. I wouldn't do a property that I have to put in a new beam and joist, but we learned a lot from that, and we finally did it. So our projects have gotten bigger every time, but I will say we've learned that maybe that's, especially while we have a kid, that's a little bit more difficult to take on. But yeah, I don't know. I went on a tangent there about how it goes working on the different levels of construction when it comes to that. But yeah, we watch a lot of YouTube and we just figure it out.
Yeah, you guys learned as you go. And again, the common theme I'm sensing is that you're not afraid to try. What you just described would scare the crap out of me. I would not attempt that personally, but I'm also not the guy. I hang pictures on the wall is about as far as I usually go. And I usually outsource the rest. But with that said, I think there's absolutely something to be said for just saying, hey, I can figure this out. I'm not afraid of it. People have done it before. There's documentation all over the place. Beyond YouTube, there's people you can call. And then the other point, you proved your own point, which is that by osmosis, you saw your parents tackle things. And so in your head, it already wasn't a big deal because you grew up around that. You saw that they solved their own problems. And so you're providing that same experience for your kid. It just proves, right, that if you grow up in an environment where people go after things like that, you're less likely to be afraid to at least take a stab or make an effort in the future.
Sometimes if you don't have a lot of money to invest or pay people to do it, you have to get a little more creative, right? And sometimes that means you have to develop the skill or you have to take the time. And that's where that comes in, is if we weren't making really lucrative money at our positions or at my business, but we made enough to get started. We made enough to like buy a nail gun. We made enough to buy some lumber, but we weren't making enough to have the savings to buy a whole property unless we were living in it, right? Because we could get the 3.5% or 5% down and get into a house that we could fix up. And then we could cash flow those things over time. And so, yeah, I think for a lot of people, when they don't have a lot of money, then you have to start developing these skills. And that's really just where it aligned for us, that that's what we needed to do to get in the game.
Yeah, no, it's incredible. And obviously, it served you well multiple times and stands to serve you well into the future as well. So, is your husband still working corporate job? I think you mentioned that earlier.
He does have a W-2 job. He's not at that same corporation. He works with a smaller company now. But yeah, we leverage that W-2 to be able to get good financing. And then it gives us that stability where I can do more inconsistent work while we homeschool and raise our, kid at home. We all work from home. So we're all together like home all the time and work on the houses and stuff like that. So it really has just been a good scenario for us to be able to do whatever we want and really craft the lifestyle that is enjoyable for us in this season of life.
Yeah, that's fantastic. So, are you a real estate professional then by the tax definition?
I won't be this year because I didn't even know about that until about halfway through the year. So I didn't start even considering like how to document or if I was going to take on that strategy, but that's the plan for this year.
And for the uninitiated, we won't turn this into a tax show, but real estate professional status is a tax designation you can take where essentially if you work a certain amount in a real estate trade or business and you can prove that you have material participation, they call it. So you're actively swinging the hammers then you can essentially take advantage of significant portion of your write-offs. So translated, basically, if you have a W-2 job and you're paying your normal taxes on it, but you own real estate and you have a potential loss to show, you can take advantage of that and pay far less taxes. So it's a neat trick if you have one spouse that's working and one that is self-employed or doing something and working on the real estate business. It's an amazing trick. We'll have to do another episode on what that is at some point. So your entrepreneurial journey, I want to talk about that a bit. So you said you ran a merchandise company. You obviously do some of the coaching. And then I see also you're putting out content, just sharing and documenting your journey. So trace us through, you've explained very well the real estate side of your journey, but what did you do coming out of, you left the job, you said you're working mental health, and then you had that kind of moment of anxiety yourself where you just needed to restore faith in humanity. What happened then?
Yeah. So at that point, I had always had in mind that I was going to get my PhD and do academia or run a private practice. So I knew that I was going to be in the business for myself a little bit and I had that in my mind. I didn't end up pursuing the PhD just for financial reasons. I just couldn't talk myself into taking on more student loans to get the PhD. Um, and I kept saying I was going to. And then when my GRE scores expired, I was like, I'm not scoring that again. Like it's 5 years later. I haven't looked at a math problem, in years. Like there's no way my scores, I'm going to even try to take that on. And so I talked myself in and out of doing more school for quite a while because that was initially the goal. But I just started I started a blog, I started Etsy. I just started these things that, especially at the time, were the way to go as far as side hustles. They were very trendy and a lot of people were having success with them. And we did that for a little bit and I struggled with my spouse on like he had a little bit different mindset about business. He's definitely more in the employee mindset and he thrives in that environment and not as driven as I am. And so he didn't understand a lot of what I was trying to do. And we had a lot of getting something going but I just kept doing things on the side and then I would work like I would get employed as like I said as a cleaning job or a nanny for families doing like household assistant type stuff. And I did that for several years until I got pregnant. And then when we started our family, I really just did the full-time mom thing for a little bit. And then that's when the pandemic happened. And then that's when he started working remotely at that point. And I finally had the time and the bandwidth, even though I had a kid at home, to actually be able to leave the house or think about business and think about the different things that I could do because I had help at home at that point. And that's really where I would say things started to take off because I actually had enough time to dedicate to what kind of business I wanted to run and how could it be successful. And that's when I started the merchandise business. And I really just was looking to fill a need during the time because a lot of manufacturing had been shut down. And so a lot of small businesses, especially in the United States, were unable to get promotional products for what they needed to do to advertise because they couldn't get any of these like big bulk orders from overseas. And so I started making small batch promotional products for these companies, like uniforms for them, hats, anything that they needed to advertise. I started doing that. I just saw that as an opportunity, and went really well. And then I got a few regular businesses on as customers, and I kept doing that. I found kind of a niche in the gaming world and took off with some designs on that. And yeah, I did that for a couple of years and it was really great. It was a lot of fun. We were all at home. We were trying to figure it out. But yeah, I just kept trying things until something hit. And I don't really have any key to success as far as that goes other than like sticking with it and really aligning it with something that you like to do.
I heard a few keys to success there, right? Like you sought out a product market and you found a need, and once you found it, you found a way to tap into it and even explore and carve out your own little niche. And so do you still run that same business with the merch?
So a little bit passively. So I still sell the designs that I made. I still sell them on like print on demand sites. And so there's still some of my work that I get like a royalty check from every month. I do get some customers still asking for me to make the products, but since I made them all in house, I really don't have a way to do that currently. That was what I was trying to get rid of was all the overhead, right? Like I was storing all of this stuff in our house so that I could make it on demand. And when we moved to this current property that we were working on, I tried to pivot to more like digital stuff so I do a little bit of I still do design work for people who were regular customers if they need their logo done or if they need a print file made for someone else who's going to manufacture their promotional products. Like I still do the digital side, but I try to stay away from doing any manufacturing in my house currently.
I was in a band back in the day. I'm a drummer, and we would always get our shirts printed, and we had merch. And it used to be that the print on demand was not a model that actually existed, right? And now that became popular. So that's interesting. You can even get royalties off of designs you put out there. That's passive income at its finest, right?
Yeah, that's probably like my greatest passive income story is having those designs take off. And even still, even though I haven't made a new design in almost a year and a half, like I still get money from those. So it's awesome.
Very cool. And so let's talk about your content journey a little bit. So I love your channel. We'll link to it here. It's Homes and Hustle, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So you got some great videos. They're pretty wide ranging, right? But like the ones obviously that caught my attention are more related to real estate. But you have how to find if your home's in a floodplain, you got why you fired one of your agents, like just these cool, not only anecdotal stories, but just like you're sharing your experience very openly while it's happening. I think you even do a little bit of stating your goals. You're not telling a backward facing story. You're like saying, this is what's going to happen. And I'll share the journey with you along the way. That is my favorite type of content creating. It's becoming more popular as I would hope it would be. But what inspired you to do that? And what are you aiming to accomplish by doing so?
Yeah, so I decided to start that before we ever got our first rental property because as I was learning about getting into the rental space, I realized how much of the information was coming from people who had already done it, right? Like you're saying, they're backward facing, they're very seasoned. They did it in a different real estate market than what today is. And while a lot of it was really good advice, and you have to have a level of discernment on if someone has the heart of a teacher, right? Like you do coaching and stuff, and you know that you have to have the heart of a teacher because you want to see your students succeed and you're not just trying to sell them something. You're not just trying to run a business. And so when it came to finding people who were talking about being in rentals who were already really established, it was hard to find anyone who was teaching it in a way that was going to be successful in the market right now because everything was shifting. There was a lot of unknowns, and they have a lot of this is the tried and true method, but there wasn't a lot of anything relatable for anyone who was new and trying to figure out while things were changing. So I just thought I might as well share and document this because I'm going to do it anyway, even if the market does shift on me, like this is still, I'm going to pursue it and we'll just see what happens. And then people will know, like, at that point, if it turned out good or not, because there was just so much fear and uncertainty around getting into real estate as far as rental properties goes, as rates were going up and prices were going up, and if it was a good strategy anymore. And if something doesn't meet the 1% rule, is it even worth doing? And so I was just thinking about sharing that so other people could find it relatable. And I had a lot of fear over using our nest egg to get into real estate and having it tied up that way. And so I just felt like I would be something I would look back on, and I would be able to either be proud of it or at least keep someone else from making the same mistakes that I did. So I just wanted to put out content that was relatable to anyone who was new and wanting to start right now, who also felt like they weren't getting any information from anyone who really understood how scary it was to get started in this new market.
That's fantastic. And that's a lot of why I do this show. That's a lot of who I write to is folks. This is one of the biggest investments you'll probably ever make if you buy real estate. Like you said, you might have saved up 10, 20, $50,000 of hard-earned money. And the idea of sinking it all into a piece of real estate is anxiety producing for a normal person.
Absolutely.
And so just getting over the hurdle and being willing to take an educated leap and put together a plan. Like, it's much easier to learn from someone like you, or I would hope my show as well, than it is to go learn from, and not trying to knock these guys, but a Pace Morby or a Grant Cardone or these guys where you can't relate to them. Maybe at one point they were in our position, but probably not. Like they had a different path. And so I think there is very much a need for channels and content of people that are really sharing as they go, because that's what most people can relate to. So on that note, and I think this is a good place to start wrapping up, is what is your kind of message or advice to people who do have saved up enough money that they could invest in real estate? They know they want to, but they just can't get past that fear. What is your message to them about whether they should do it or not and how to go about it?
Yeah. So when it comes to whether you should do it or not, if you're having a little bit of fear, that's completely normal. And I would say I'm right there with you. And I've felt the fear. And I remember wanting to back out days before closing and just put the money into ourselves instead of into a property. But a little bit of fear is normal, right? But if you're having crippling anxiety over if you're going to be able to handle it enough, something that I work with a lot of people on is the anxiety comes when you feel like you're not equipped to handle the difficulty. So you have to work on equipping yourself before you take on a challenge that is giving you anxiety. So that means there's a lot of troubleshooting that goes on before you ever need to sign the dotted line. And that may mean, are you worried about the property manager? That may mean shadowing property managers. You need to see what they do so that it demystifies what it is you have anxiety over. It may mean testing out some tools or watching 10 hours of YouTube on the things that seem like they're giving you anxiety. If it's a financial thing, it just may mean that you need to have more reserves in the bank before you take it on. And that's okay. There's other ways to put your money to use that aren't tying it up, where it can still be liquid and you can still get a little bit of a return on it, and you can save up more reserves if that's the thing that's giving you anxiety. If you're getting anxiety over whether or not you're going to have to go unclog a toilet, I would say you're going to, on some level, you have to push through some of those things that are small that you get worried about. All right. I mean, when my tenants text me now, I still get anxiety. I don't know what is going to happen, right? But at the end of the day, like we have lived in houses all of our lives, right? And nothing has ever fallen apart to the point where it was not repairable. Like, we're buying properties that are solid. We're taking care of them. It's, at the end of the day, I'm like, we've made it through 30 years of living in houses and not having a disaster. So when it comes to things like that, you just have to remind yourself that you can handle most of that. And I've always told people, when it comes to, if I were to lose a property or if my tenants were to sue me and take, the house or whatever, it will just make for a better comeback story. And I'm good with that. If that's the position I get in, I'm sharing it anyways. Everyone's going to find that entertaining. So we'll just take it from there. And I just have that attitude about it where even if it all goes up in dust, that's fine. We can start over again. It's not a huge deal. I would think you have to really, like I said, you have to really equip yourself for the stuff that you have anxiety over. But once you do it the first time, it changes everything, because once you do sign the dotted line, once you put your money into play, you start to realize that it truly is a game, and that it isn't the nest egg like you think, right? It's putting your nest egg in a different type of bank. It's relocating it. And you're starting to play this game of like, where can I park my money to protect it the most, to leverage it the best, to grow and have wealth. And once you get in the game and you start to realize it's a tool like that, it really clicks. And then it takes away a lot of the fear. I would say if you are doing your whole nest egg like we did on ours, it is hard to push past signing the line and saying I'm going to jump in and do it. But once you do, it really does. It changes everything. And I think there's probably smaller ways you can get in the game and kind of like stair step into it, whether that's with a house hack or something. But yeah, you just have to get started.
That is so good. So much good stuff there. And it reminds me of this common exercise called fear setting, right? Where you write down your worst fears, and then in one column, and then in the next column, you write down what you would do if those things happen. The house burns down, the hot water heater explodes, like all these things. We chase all these outlier scenarios in our head. Like, well, what if this happens? What if that happens? Rarely do we actually go through the exercise of exploring what we would do. And sometimes when you write that out, you realize that even the worst case outcomes are not as bad as we think they are. So,
yeah. And even if they're that bad, they're handleable, right? Like you can do something with it.
Yeah, there's a way to recover from just about anything. Yeah, that's an important thing to realize too. And many people have, right? Real estate is one of the most common investment vehicles. Like you said, everyone lives somewhere. And so most of these problems have been solved before thousands, tens of thousands of times. And so we don't have to reinvent the wheel. We just need to learn how to solve our way out of any pickles we find ourselves in. Sierra, This has been so awesome. Where can people find you? How can they keep in touch with you? And anything else you'd like to, final words, share with the audience?
Yeah, you can pretty much find me on all social media. YouTube obviously would be the best because I'd love some new subscribers. Homes and Hustles there. I'm Homes and Hustles on X. And I will be Homes and Hustles on Instagram as well, transitioning from my merch business to that. Yeah, that's where you can find me and connect with me. And if you're interested in more coaching or mindset stuff, I like to do think tanks throughout the year. And so that's a good free way to test the waters on if you need that community or that accountability. Yeah, and you can message me on Instagram to find out more about that.
Awesome. I will link to all that in the show notes so you can get in touch with Sierra. And I highly encourage everyone to do that. So thanks so much for coming on, and we'll have you back again sometime soon.
Thanks for having me on. This was fun.